The observer pattern is so common that Java has actually built it into its own language. So in the Java libraries, you'll actually find an observable class and an observer class, which is actually an interface. So to make use of these, what you would do is you would just subclass from here and implement this. So now let's look at an example of doing this for ourselves.
So suppose that in our simple drawing player, we want to add an observer that saves our songs as we play them. So if we have all of our shapes, instead of just clicking play whole drawing, we want to play them individually in a specific order by clicking each individual shape. Okay, so now what we want to do is decide who's who. Who are we observing and what is doing the observation? So we want to observe when a shape is played. So we want the play shape tool to be the subject of the observation. So we're not making a new subject, we're using an existing class. Every time a shape is played, we want something to be able to observe it. Now, the play shape tool unfortunately already extends something. It extends tool. So we can't also have it extend Java's observable class. So we'll keep walking up the hierarchy and we'll see where we can stick observable in. So up in the tool class, we can say extends observable. Now, observable is a normal class, not an abstract class, so it has no abstract methods. There's no responsibility on the subclasses to implement anything or use anything. So it's totally okay that all of these other tools now also have this extra free behavior. We're only going to make use of that inside the play shape tool, and that's completely fine. Now we want to create our observer, and our observer is none of the things that already exist in our system. It's a brand new piece of functionality. So to capture that, we're going to make a new package to house our observer, and let's just call it SongSaver. And it's going to implement an interface called the observer interface, and that's the one we get for free from Java. Now, IntelliJ is going to complain because we need to implement the methods. So let's implement this update method. Here's the stub of the update method from observable, and notice how generic these parameters are. It's passing in any observable object and then any object. So we have to cast those down if we want to use them for anything other than just basically printing them out. So this requires a little bit of knowledge on the part of our SongSaver about what kind of observer we're going to be getting and what kind of argument is going to be passed in. So there's a little bit of slightly unprincipled stuff happening here, but we're in a safe space, so it's okay. So now that we have our update method existing, we need to go decide where we want to call addObserver. Since we want it to be related to the play shape tool, we might as well call it right from inside the constructor of the play shape tool, right after this super call. So we'll say addObserver right here, and we're creating a new observer for the play shape tool. Now we want to decide where we trigger the observation. We want to trigger the observation when a shape is played. So let's go down to our playShapeAt method, and right in here, if the shape is not null before we do anything else, we insert our call to notify observers. And we can pass in the shape that's being played because that is actually what we want to record. And if we look at notify observers, we can see that it takes any object as an argument, so it's fine to pass in a shape. And then remember that it's going to call update on our observer inside this complicated code. And it's going to pass in the argument that we're giving it, which in our case is just the shape. Now we want to go back to our observer and implement our update method so that we can watch the shape that's being played. And we're just going to do something really simple. We're just going to print out the shape. So we'll add a toString method down here in shape. And we'll just say generate toString. And then we can just select all these fields. But then maybe we don't actually want all these lines, just X, Y, width, and height, so we can delete a few. And now we go back into our SongSaver, and we can just say system.out.print playing shape, and then arg. Okay, now let's hit play and see if it works. So let's make some shapes and play them individually. And look at that, nothing's being printed out. Why is nothing being printed out? And the reason is, of course, that the Java observable interface has one funny idiosyncrasy. And if we look inside this notify observers method, we'll see what it is. It only notifies the observers if something has changed in the subject. So before we call notify observers, if we want notify observers to actually call update, we need to first call a little method called setChanged, which sets change to true. And now it should work. So let's make our shapes and say play shape, and we can see that we have our observation.
There are lots and lots of ways that you can implement the observer pattern. You can decide when you register observers with a subject, and you can decide how the observer actually gets updates from the subject. So the classic way that an observer gets updates from the subject is just that the subject calls update from its inside of its notify method, and it sends all of the information about the update to the observer. We'll just say that this is some sort of string. This is kind of akin to you getting text messages on your phone. So you'll see the whole message appear. This is a push notification. Now sometimes you might decide, I don't actually want push notifications. They're kind of ruining my life. I'm just getting overwhelmed by too many push notifications from this application. So you'll turn them off, which basically says, okay, you might still get updates from the application, but instead you're going to have to pull that information from the application when you want it. So these updates no longer contain all that rich information. They might just even be a little dot next to the icon saying, hey, you have a little bit of an update here. Then what you will have to do is pull that back. So you would call something called getState, or on your phone you would just hit the icon, but in the observer pattern you would call getState. And then what the subject would do is send you back all of that rich information. So it would finally show you all of your messages, or show you all of your emails, or whatever those richer updates would have been before you turned off the push notifications.